Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Campus Urban Farm docent training on Campus Urban Farm areas and elements. Let's get started. So this is your walkthrough of the Campus Urban Farm, and in terms of the main elements of the farm is approximately 0.11 acres, and it's made up of a few major sections. So going in order, there is an outdoor classroom that's on the back of the shed. The farm shed structure itself, which is essentially the wooden nursery shed that takes up a lot of the footprint. And then you have the various growing areas, which include raised beds, vertical and container growing areas, as well as several sustainability features throughout the farm, which will draw attention to. The growing areas can also be divided into several subsections with different functions as well, which we'll go over now. So in terms of the overall map of the Campus Urban Farm, there are a lot of different elements as you walk in. So basically coming in from the physical plant parking lot as you're entering off of Pacific View / Glen Curtis Drive. First thing to your left is going to be the campus compost scrap drop-off bin. So this is where we collect food scraps for our composting projects. We also have a farm bulletin board that has our signage on it, as well as announcements, a couple of outdoor tables for people to relax and enjoy. And then as you enter the gate on the gravel walkway, then you enter the gates of the actual farm. So going around counterclockwise, so as you kind of make your way around the sidewalk, there's a raised ground bed to your side, there's a potato barrel. You kind of come around to the north and there's a hydroponics tower array that's connected to several solar panels and battery storage. Then as you keep moving along, there's also a container section full of herbs. And then once you hit that corner, you run into several demonstration beds, which are just more raised beds, but they have specific functions that demonstrate a particular concept or serve a particular function. So there's the Ollie Dosen bed, there's a Three Sisters bed, there's a succession bed, and then a native bed. As you come along heading south, then you'll be passing several vertical gardening areas as well as some bird boxes. So because it's mostly fence line at this location and there's not enough space for a raised bed, it's all vertical projects and edible vines and shrubs as well. As you pass through, then if you get to the back of the farm, there's an outdoor classroom seating area, which we use for events. And it raises up into a platform, which we can set up a projector out there as well. And then either way, either coming from the south or the north, you can enter into the nursery shed, which is kind of the tool storage / check-in area where we have a desk, we have an interior living display, we've got all of the tools and gloves and everything inside the nursery shed. So that's kind of the space in terms of what we're dealing with. Also to the far right, in the southern corner, we have compost piles. So that's where we put all of our outdoor composting projects as well. And that's also located near the hose bibs and drain barrel where we actually have the hoses in order to water the farm, as well as an outdoor sink. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of orientation into where everything at the farm is located if you haven't had the privilege or ability to see the farm in person. So in terms of walking you back through those spaces with some photos, so the outdoor classroom, as I pointed out, is used for demonstration purposes and large crowds. Generally orientations for volunteers and or workshops are held here because it's the biggest space where everyone can gather. This is also the location where the gate that heads out back towards the facilities yard is located. So basically, if you look at the photo where the chairs are, if you were to just go straight to the right, there would be a gate. And if you went through it, there would be a small bathroom to head over to the left. Essentially, the facilities, auto shop, and grounds department are kind enough to let us share. So it is a privilege, not a right. It might be tempting to kind of hang out back there. People might be tempted to go sit at the tables and things like that, but that is an employee break area. So if you want to remind visitors, don't linger outside of the fence line if you need to use the restroom. That'll be really helpful to us and be good neighbors to our facility services department. In terms of the capabilities of this space, so there are a bunch of chairs located in the nursery shed that can be brought out and put back. We also do have an outdoor pop-up screen that we can pull out for special events if we want to do PowerPoint or video, as well as a solar-powered projector to be able to do that setup. And then you can see in the central area, those two bricks essentially hold up the pop-up projector, and we can set up on that space. So that's the outdoor classroom, as well as the nearest access to the restroom. In terms of the physical farm shed, so again, all supplies and tools are stored here, including the check-in station, which is and volunteer to do task board, which is located just in that desk area as you first come in. Shed organization is extremely important just because we have a lot of users, a lot of different groups coming in. So always make sure you're following the labeling when you're putting things back. Generally, if you take something out, put it back where you found it, and that'll help keep the shed clean and organized for everyone, so we can always find our tools and our supplies. Our shed inventory is continually under development and updates just because we do get donations, we get new supplies. So we try to keep on top of that. But again, if you can help us out by making sure that everything that's kept in the shed is returned to its original spot, that really helps us keep control of our inventory and make sure that we're not missing things. And in general, when visitors come, they want to sign in at the nursery or at the desk inside the farm shed, as well as collect gloves. And you can also collect dry glove laundry here. So basically all of the supplies that you need in order to do maintenance tasks at the farm are all located inside of this shed. In terms of the growing area, so things that you want to pay attention to in terms of areas that actually grow plants. So even before you get into the farm gates, you'll notice that there are a lot of native plants surrounding the fence line on the outside. So that area actually circles all the way around the fence until it hits the hillside. And it generally consists of California native plants, which are mostly drought resistant. So these are plants that are a little bit tougher, a little more adapted for the environment, so don't need to be watered as often. And can handle the generally poor soil that we have just in the ground on campus. And they're really important too. They're not just decorative. They actually do help attract beneficial and or native pollinators specifically to the farm. And you really can't have successful crops unless you have pollinators helping to pollinate those crops. So that actually is a win-win because we actually get to pollinate our crops, but also support local natural ecosystems as well. And also in general, it does need some water. So water about 1 time per week on average. So make sure that the space isn't getting neglected in terms of your maintenance rounds when it comes to watering. In terms of the major workhorses for the farm is definitely our raised beds. So we have 15 raised beds that are 4 feet by 4 feet. And they really do produce the bulk of the crops on the farm. So each of the crops in the beds are planted with a companion crop, as well as being looked at in terms of its history, really to ensure maximum production. So we're very careful about what we plant in those beds because we want to make sure we're being as successful as we can in terms of producing food for the campus. In terms of that space, it's very highly planned out in terms of making sure that we're doing crop rotation, that we're planting the right thing, that we're planting with compatible species. So that's pretty closely managed. There's also one additional ground version of a raised bed. So not all raised beds have to look a certain way. So in terms of the area to your right as you walk on, this raised bed looks a little different. So it's pretty low to the ground. It has a pop-up green nursery shelter above it just to keep the rabbits out and things like that. And it's also pretty long, so it makes it a little more appropriate for vining and ground spreading crops. So unlike the 4x4 squares, any plants that we put in there actually have space to spread out. So generally you'll find watermelon, which is pretty long and vining during the summertime, as well as winter squashes during the cool season when we rotate that crop. So just a heads up that's a little bit of a different setup, but ultimately similar function. In terms of other specialty areas, so there's a herb container garden next to the hydroponics where it's essentially a bunch of pots that have different herbs. Container planting is actually an example of a pretty viable option for people with small spaces. So if you're dealing with people who are coming from more of an urban living situation where maybe they don't have a big backyard, they just have a small patio, something like that is something you may want to mention, that it's a good way to get a lot of crops in small spaces. In this particular herb garden, we've got a variety of different herbs that are mostly labeled. So we have mint, we have lavender, curry, rosemary, lemongrass, etc. And herbs are really valuable for several reasons, but for our particular case, it's especially popular with campus dining, which basically is able to put it in their dishes at Toro Fresh and other campus dining eateries and actually locally source food and have it go a long way. And we also use it at offices sustainability cooking demonstrations at the farmers market special events and for classes at the farm elsewhere, as well as educational activities. So in terms of the value of herbs, a little goes a really long way. So they're still a really important part of the farm in terms of, actually enhancing our ability to conduct programming and support the farm mission. In terms of the other areas right next to it, so there are also 4 demonstration beds right to the left of, to the left of the herb container garden, and they're backed up against the corner because they have a special function. So essentially there are 3 educationally focused beds. So the first is the Native American garden bed, which features species that are important to Native peoples and are localized to a high degree. And then there's actually a special video that you can watch in terms of providing the context of that. And in the middle is a succession planting bed. So that's just an example of how you can plant, based on succession. So not planting all your crops at once, but actually planning to make sure that you're getting continuous harvest throughout the season. And generally you'll find a warm season crop of, let's say, radishes, and then cool season generally trends towards lettuces on an annual basis. So that's generally what you'll find there. Also, there's a Three Sisters bed, so featuring Mesoamerican companion planting. So Three Sisters essentially is corn, beans, and squash. So a little explanation on that. Again, we have a video to support more context in that area. And then finally, we have the Ollie Docent bed, which is just set up differently. So Ollie, the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, sends several students every semester who actually have a long-term relationship with the farm. So to reward senior docents who have been with the farm for a long time and put in a lot of service hours, we actually carved out this specific area for them. And as you can see, it's set up a little differently. There's more smaller containers, sub-containers within it, so that more people can actually spread out and plant their own areas. And that's actually the only place that we allow personal use planting at the farm as well, as a special perk for essentially being a special docent. And these beds are specifically designed to appeal and support educational topics for particular class subjects. So review the Native Garden and Three Sisters videos to understand the context of why we planted those. And that'll help you in terms of explaining that to other classes that might be interested in these beds specifically. And again, this is all in the northwest corner of the farm, back along the wall. So as you turn that corner, again, there's a bunch of vertical gardening experiments. And this is important to point out because we really need to maximize the farm's footprint. If you notice the sizing, it's not really huge in terms of the land space that we have available. So instead of just leaving the fence line completely untapped, we can actually use that vertical space to help maximize that footprint. And again, most of the horizontal space has already been utilized by those 15 raised beds. So there's, so we need to go up essentially if we want to continue growing. And the picture in this particular example is just a strawberry bed in a vertical planter situation. And these strawberries are actually capable of producing year round. So a nice little experiment of, or demonstration of vertical gardening principles. We also have several edible vines as you continue on. So vines are great because they essentially grow up. So that's also an example of vertical gardening. And the reason some of these are in pots is that because not all the soil in the farm is particularly usable. It's not great quality. It's very hard to break into. So some plants that really need good soil are just in pots to make sure that we can continue supporting their growth. And they also require a little bit more focused watering than plants in the ground, so they don't have access to that nice wide root line to be able to access more moisture. And again, this is an example of vertical planting and maximizing space wherever you happen to be. Also, as you come into the nursery shed, there's also this kind of random area in the corner as you next to the walkway that we call the decorative garden. So the plants that we put here are generally either low light or very low maintenance or mostly decorative in function. So you see a lot of succulents that are pretty drought tolerant, as well as different types of native plants, maybe, flowers, things like that. Most of them have some kind of decorative or medicinal purpose. And the reason that they're here is mostly because it's the least optimal growing space at the farm. It's kind of shady, it's kind of out of the way, it's not an obvious watering area. So only put plants here that can put up either with a lot of neglect or they don't require tons of care in order to do high growth and crop yields like we do on the raised beds and other high priority growing areas. So that's kind of the context of that particular area of the farm. Also, you'll notice that throughout the farm, there are several fruit and herbal trees. So those can generally be found in pots as well as directly in the dirt inside and around the outside of the farm. So we have banana trees, avocado, lime, lemon, etc., and we get more all the time. And the thing with trees is that they do require deep watering as well as more watering when young. So unlike the rest of the plants at the farm, when you hit those trees, they need a lot more deep watering. Also, there is a whole grove of, in our satellite location over by the LSU loading dock called the Earth Day / Citrus Grove. So essentially every year on Earth Day, we also plant a fruit tree of some kind, generally citrus, over in that location as part of our annual tree planting ceremony. And so we also maintain that area as well and are able to harvest from there as well too. So we have that. Also, there's a unique growing project right in the corner called Potato Barrel. So we get a lot of questions about that, but essentially it's to demonstrate the concept that you can turn virtually any barrel into a high-yield potato container. Basically what you do is you add drainage to the bottom of the barrel, you set it up on some bricks to give it height and circulation, and essentially you just do the 6-inch rule. So you fill the bottom with 6 inches of soil, put some more potatoes, and then put another 6 inches of soil on top. And then when the green potato stalks get to 6 inches high, you bury 3/4 of it with more soil, plant more potatoes, and then you just keep repeating over and over and over again until the barrel is full. So once the barrel is full, you can either harvest as new baby potatoes when the topmost layer is flowering or is about 6 to 10 weeks old, or you can just wait until all the green foliage dies and then you're ready to tip out the whole barrel and you can harvest all the mature potatoes at once. So it's a nice little seasonal addition to make sure we have consistent flow of potatoes at the farm. So that's the concept for that. Also right next to it, you'll notice the interesting looking hydroponic towers. So these were granted to us as a donation, but hydroponic towers in general are kind of expensive, but they're very useful because of their efficiency. So they're able to grow a very high level of crops in a very limited growing space. As you can see, that footprint's pretty small, but it's still able to generate a lot of produce on that tower. Also, it's interesting because no soil is required. So essentially it just grows in these little pods, which means that the potential for weeds is also greatly reduced. Essentially how it works is that it runs on an automatic timer, which waters the plant on a schedule that should be ideal for the amount of water actually needed for that plant. So all of that nutrient-rich water is essentially pumped up to the top of the tower every 15 minutes, and then it just trickles down and on the inside of the tower, which wets the hydroponic plugs that are in each of those slots, slash the plant roots. So that's how the plants are able to continually get water on a regular basis. In our particular situation, normally you just plug it into the wall, but because we have no on-site electricity, Central Plant actually built this accompanying solar array, as well as a battery storage closet, and connected them to the hydroponic tower so that during the daytime it's able to run off of the solar, and the solar charges batteries, and so that it can also run at night. So that essentially means these towers run on 100% solar energy, which is a cool little project to feature at our Campus Urban Farm. Another demonstration project that we have in process is the aquaponics system. So aquaponics is essentially the use of fish to help create a natural cycle with the water and the plants to create kind of a self-contained ecosystem that enables you to grow plants a different way. In the case of the farm, it's a pretty small system. It's mostly demonstration. In really large aquaponics systems, you can actually eat the fish. For Cal State Dominguez Hills, we were kind of the mind of fish are friends, not food. So that doesn't actually apply in this scenario, but it is a cool little demonstration project to make note of and bring up during tours and such. So in terms of the solar situation, so again, going back to those hydroponic towers, there's that gray closet that accompanies that. If you were to open it up, it's essentially our battery storage closet. So again, Central Plant installed those solar panels that connect to the batteries, those green batteries you can see in the photo there. And essentially that creates a self-sufficient off-grid solar array. So it's able to provide 100% renewable energy to the farm. So a larger version of this is also on the nursery shed as well. So you can also tell visitors that we're 100% solar there in terms of running the aquaponics system and the other electronics inside the nursery shed as well. And again, batteries are a critical part of the situation because if you put solar panels on something, it'll only run during the day unless you also have batteries which allow the panels to charge those batteries during the daytime and then basically release that energy at night. So that's essentially how all the solar projects at the Campus Urban Farm work. So other sustainability features also are the water capture system that we try to put in place. Here you can see a picture of a rain barrel. So that's that black barrel at the bottom, as well as the rain chain that feeds out of it, and then the rain gutters, which actually trap any rainwater that we're able to get. So this is important because any methods for capturing and or slowing down urban runoff is generally good for the environment. So as much as you can from a sustainability perspective, you want to try to capture natural rainwater that's falling onto your site and actually harvest that for useful purposes, and or allow it to slow down so it's actually able to filter into the water table as opposed to just running off directly to the ocean or into the street, and things like that. Plus, we can actually use this captured rainwater to help water crops at our own farm. Also, if you notice the sink that's right next to it, it doesn't actually connect out to the sewer line. It actually flows into a bucket that we're actually able to use to capture water as well and water our crops. So we're trying to be as self-sufficient as we can in terms of our water consumption. So instead of sending that water to the sewer, we make sure we only use eco-friendly soap in the sink, if anything, and then that enables us to use that water for crops instead of just dumping it. So that's just another example of a sustainability feature at the Campus Urban Farm. So hopefully you enjoyed that virtual walkthrough. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Campus Urban Farm. And thanks for your attention.